Greetings. Welcome to ITR Live. I'm your host, Chris Hagenow, and we are here in the Hendrickson Library at the Center for the Preservation of Western Civilization. We have a very special guest today who hasn't been here in a while. We have Alan Ostergren with us today. Welcome, Alan.
Thank you, Chris. It's a pleasure to be here in the new space. I've not had a chance yet to record a podcast with you here. I like it very much.
It's a little more cozy.
It is more cozy. I think it's set up well for, I know we have some viewers on YouTube. I don't know if there's any other channels for the visual part of the podcast, but I think it's good. You have all these books here. Mm-hmm. Are these John's personal books?
This is the Hendrickson Library. These are all of his books. And it's not an insignificant collection. There's a lot of actually really good stuff on the shelves here. So
I'm sure you could substitute a very expensive liberal arts degree just by reading all of these books.
I remember helping him stack them up a couple times because they were at the old office. But he's a great care has been put into his organizational system. It's by theme. It's not Dewey Decimal or anything like that. But
well, you have the Reagan shelf.
Yeah, exactly.
There, which is good. I can see kind of early Supreme Court history. There's good stuff here. Yep. I own several of these books myself. I bet John has read all of his. I can't say the same about mine, but
no, I think he has read them. So have you noticed we have the book of the week now downstairs too?
I did not. I missed that.
You'll need to check that. There is the Hendrickson Library book of the week right there at the front door. So,
okay.
Yeah.
I will investigate this.
No, it's actually a thing. I know everyone thinks it's just a joke. No, we are live from the Hendrickson Library. So, and I overheard you downstairs before that you had some thoughts on the intro and the new name for the studio. Is it too much?
Well, it's a mouthful.
It is a mouthful.
The Center for the Preservation of Defending.
Western Civilization.
What's the acronym? Is it?
I didn't even think about that.
It's just a lot.
It is a lot. I think I wanted it to be a lot.
Okay.
But I don't know. It's throw people off.
You got to give the people what they want.
Yeah, that's right. And I have sort of said, ITR World Headquarters, but I don't think that's fair either. And I think you as a Muscatine native probably understand that that's still probably not completely accurate. So,
Right.
Anyway, well, okay, so we're here. And we haven't had you here in a while. So the really fun part about today's episode is we're not really quite sure where we're going or how we're going to get there, but we've decided that we're going to make an honest effort out of it. So I guess first things first, while I'm not going to ask you about any specific legislation or matters, give me your thoughts on this year's legislative session. I know you actively watch, obviously, we've talked a lot about property taxes in general. Thoughts on the prospects for reform or anything else that you think may come out, especially on the tax side this year?
Sure. Well, I think it's a very interesting, different 91st General Assembly than it was for the 90th. I remember being on this podcast the fall before the 90th General Assembly, the last one, and saying that it could end up being one of the most conservative and impactful General Assemblies that we've had in the history of the state. And I think that proved to be true with the education reforms that the legislature and the governor got accomplished. And this one, I think, is a little bit more of a kind of a reset. Conservatives in the State House have accomplished a lot. I think if you reflect on where we were in 2009, as Terry Branstad was exploring running for governor again, the Democrats were in charge of the legislature. Governor Culver had just imposed a 10% across-the-board budget cut because they had overspent, and the financial crisis was really sapping state revenues, and everything just was in chaos.
Yeah. It was my first year in the legislature. I remember it well.
Yeah, and so we're in such a different season now, and it would be easy just to kind of enjoy the ride a little bit. And what I sense from the governor and Republican legislative leaders is now they're drilling down into much more discrete reforms and improvements, looking at some of the child care bills that are out there that have a real impact on workforce, looking at some education reforms that are not big picture, let's enact ESAs, but it's fixing some things that don't work for homeschooling and helping charter schools get established, those kinds of things. So this is I think a transition kind of General Assembly is what it's shaping up for. But it's so early in the session also. We haven't gotten down to, as you mentioned on the last podcast, what's going to be the number for state aid to schools. And we have not gotten into the budget season yet. And so I think it's too soon to tell exactly what the impact will be of this first session. But certainly I think we can enjoy the fact that conservatives have accomplished an enormous amount over the last 15 years.
I've tried to. I appreciate you saying all that, and I'm still trying to find my way to articulate the idea the way I mean it to. But we've done so many big thematic conservative reforms, and because there isn't one of those in a particular year doesn't mean that the legislature isn't doing what needs to be done. Is those maybe more attention-grabbing issues, or like at some point you're engaged in conservative governance of a red state, and that is sort of the everyday blocking and tackling of doing the I don't even call them smaller things because they're significant, but they're not maybe as sweeping as some of the other things we've done in the past. And there'll always be things that need to be done, but
as conservatives, frankly, we should celebrate the idea that the legislature would come into town, fix some things that need to be fixed, pass a sensible budget, and go home.
Yeah. Limited government maybe means doing less. There are many in the legislature, even on the Republican side of the aisle, that think their success is measured by how much legislation they pass, and I completely reject that idea. Just because you did more doesn't mean that you've done well. Not to say that any of those particular bills aren't maybe worthwhile, but doing less is a noble thing.
I would love to see it, and it would never happen for a host of practical reasons that we could get into, but I would love to see in our state constitution that once every 10 years or something like that, the legislature has to have a special repeal session.
Oh, that'd be great.
That they have to convene, but the only thing they can do is repeal laws.
Yeah.
Prune out the dead growth in the state code. When I was a young lawyer, a law student, I remember, the code was, I think, 3 volumes, and the code is, physically it's twice as big than it was 30 years ago. Yep. I couldn't tell you the exact number, but I mean, the number of administrative regulations grow and grow and grow, even with realignment, even with a regulatory refresh that the governor has been working on. The tendency of government to just simply grow and grow and grow is always there. And so having an attitude of we're just simply going to prune back, make smart spending decisions, and then go home and go back to our communities and go back to our lives, that's a good thing.
I could be talked into only convening once every other year, maybe coming back in I guess it would be the even year for budget updates, but a policy, a full-blown policy session like we have now is once every 2 years. I could be talked into that idea. There's always going to be things that need to be addressed, but that's the way we used to operate. I don't remember when, generations ago. We just meet every other year. Well, good. I think the main theme, at least from my perspective, and maybe it's because I run a low tax organization, will be property taxes this year. I certainly get asked about it a lot by folks, by media, what's going to end up happening. And it still seems, you're a step removed from it, but the only plan that is out there in the media is a 2% hard spending cap. And so that seems to be getting a lot of attention.
It's this crazy right-wing group out in the western suburbs with just these fanatic. It's like a cult or something that's pushing this idea, right?
Shadowy. Would we be? Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, I think we should pull some more blinds.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm going to start using code words for you, Chris. We need a secret agent name.
I want to evolve into being more of an enigma.
Right. I'm going to start calling you Carlos Danger.
Good. All right. Well, enough about the legislature because, frankly, we talk about it a lot. we had a conversation earlier today, Alan, that I found very interesting. Your background is as a prosecutor, former county attorney, among other things you've done in the legal profession. But you always have a really smart take on things that are happening, in criminal law or around the country or just legal matters in general. But we had an interesting conversation about President Trump, deportations, and what's really happening there. And I found it interesting. But I'm just going to kind of throw that out to you. Like, what's your perspective on what's actually happening? Is this, and maybe where are we going from here?
Well, my perspective is that, essentially, the new administration has let the parts of the immigration enforcement system that are so active right now simply do their job. I can remember as a county prosecutor, the huge change from when the Obama administration came in and de-emphasized immigration enforcement, and then the first Trump administration came in. I remember seeing some immigration agents at the courthouse who were there early 2017 to arrest somebody who had an immigration detainer after he'd been sentenced in state court and remove him from the country. And I just was like, guys, where have you been? And they knew exactly where I was. Yeah. I was, of course, good nature ribbing them, but there's no real secret sauce here. It's simply turning on the parts of the system that are supposed to function. Right. For all the loose talk about dictatorship and all these things, these are all authorities that the government has and could have been doing for years. Yeah. What the Biden administration inflicted on our country was a deliberate choice. It was not just simply people who didn't do as good of a job as they could have. It was a deliberate choice by the prior administration. I heard today on the news, it's I think a shocking number that of the people who've been removed to date by the Trump administration over the last 2 weeks, and they've made a big push on immigration enforcement, 97% of those individuals had a pre-existing order of removal. Okay. The government had already said you cannot be in the country, and they were still here.
And that's when you talk about a pre-existing order of removal, it's not because they crossed the border without permission. Like presumably there's been some subsequent act that has generated that, correct?
In almost all of those situations, that order of removal is going to have been based on they have been convicted of a crime in the United States. There could be all kinds of reasons, but for one way or another, an appropriate level of an immigration official has said, you are ordered removed from the country. An immigration court has said, you are removed. And so, the image that the Democrats want to create and their allies in the media and the vast non-government organization infrastructure that gets millions and billions of dollars to perpetuate this immigration catastrophe that we had from the Biden administration. The image that they want to create is, the starving asylum seeker who's at the border, who's desperate for help. And that's not the person that we're talking about in this group that have been removed over the last couple of weeks. We're talking about people who've committed a crime by entering illegally in the first place and have, in most situations, committed crimes while in the United States. And now simply somebody is saying, look, you have been caught before. We have your fingerprints on file. Here you are again. The paper says you're removed from the country. We're going to enforce that order, and off you go. Yeah.
That's I think it's like I saw the video of it was a Haitian who they'd picked up, and it's some violent crimes that he'd committed, and he's just screaming at the cameras and, I'm going to kill everybody, and it doesn't want to go back to Haiti. I'm not going, but well, that's the kind of person that we're talking about here, right?
Right.
And I think that factors in too. Some of these folks, I think we saw it in Colombia and maybe it was Honduras or Guatemala. and the leaders in those countries really pushing back, and we aren't going to allow this. That's inhumane until I think it really came right down to it, and President Trump pushed back that this is who we're talking about, and they've sort of relented on some of those things. But
in between the third hole and the seventh hole, playing golf. I mean, he fixed that whole problem with Colombia, right? With it, there was no interagency working group. There was no white paper circulated.
I saw that. It's like, what would
the Rand Corporation didn't do a study. He just got his phone out and fixed it.
Right. Other
awesome
interaction between two countries on a conflict like that in any other administration, Republican or Democrat, is going to be all of these interactions through the State Department and working groups, like you said. And it's just Trump just gets out his phone and just does it. And like, whatever you think of Donald Trump, that is amazing. This, by sheer force of will, he works through those things and is getting wins.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, he's redefining our expectations of how the presidency works every day.
So, the way you framed up the deportation thing, or it kind of made me think a little bit. There's been sort of a shock and awe of all of the executive orders and actions from President Trump in these first, I don't know, how are we 2 weeks in now? It seems like it's been longer than that. But how much of that, it seems to me that I'm going to break this down into separate questions. I'm sorry. Is it your perspective that these are things that he is within his authority to do? That these are, like on the immigration, it's just enforcing a law that's on the books. That's what we're talking about here, right? Do you see any place where he's really stepping outside of the authority that Congress has given him?
I've been impressed by how carefully drafted the executive orders are, at least the ones I've seen. And I can't say I've read every single one that has come out of the White House, but there's a lot of work that has gone in during the last 4 years, I think, preparing for this moment. And I think the administration is doing an excellent job of asserting the authorities that over the years Congress has given the president. And, you can have a bigger conversation about should the Congress have empowered the president to do certain things. Tariffs is one of the foreign policy tools that the president has been using very effectively. And sure, you can have a policy discussion and get really wonky about should Congress have done that. And maybe there's arguments on both sides of that question, but Congress did it.
Yeah.
Congress gave those authorities to the president. The executive order, one of the things that the administration has already done that's a remarkable achievement is repealing Lyndon Johnson's executive order that pushed basically state-sponsored racism through affirmative action programs and federal contracting. And so, what you get by an executive order, you can take away by an executive order, right? So those are things that are, if the first thing was legal, then what President Trump did was legal. You can't argue both sides of that question. Now, certainly there's going to be court challenges, and some of these orders, I think, are designed to put these issues in front of the courts. And there's going to be a legal team. Hopefully, we're going to get an attorney general confirmed here in the next day or two, and they're going to fight back. I think one of the payoffs over the years of getting sound originalist judges, especially in the Supreme Court, is that some of the underpinnings of the administrative state are going to fall away because you finally are going to have judges who are willing to reconsider very flawed precedents over the years.
Yeah, that also feeds into, I guess, this thought I have that much of what these executive orders or enforcement that's come out so quickly, yes, they are very significant because they are a departure from the practice that we'd seen during the previous administration. But it seems like much of it is simply getting back to a place of normalcy, or a place what the status quo was not that long ago in our country, where we actually, enforced, our immigration policies, and that's what we're doing now, or we are putting an end to some of the grift that exists with some of these government agencies. And so I'm incredibly encouraged by all of it because it seems like we're getting a lot of wins and a lot of undoing a lot of the bad things that have happened to take our country the wrong direction. So long may it continue.
Yes. I mean, we're only 2.5 weeks in, and, I find myself pinching myself of how good it is so far. And, look, there'll be tough weeks ahead and great weeks ahead, and we need to recognize that. But what you see going on right now, particularly some of the, the Doge, the team that they have looking at grants, the U.S. Agency for International Development is right now under the microscope. What's happening right now is the early stages of inflicting not just a political defeat on the left, because they can come back from just an ordinary political defeat. They can, an ordinary Republican president kind of dials back some things and they move the bureaucracy in a little bit of a direction. And what happens is all these people in kind of the professional managerial class go off to their nonprofits for 4 years, nonprofits that are sucking in federal tax dollars everywhere that they can. And they just kind of, and frankly, they all make more money in the nonprofit sector in all these groups. And then their team goes back into power and it's all back to normal. And you say, what do we accomplish with having a Republican president for 4 years or 8 years? Well, we slowed the bleeding a little bit. Well, great. How about saving the patient, right?
Right.
And so it's not, we don't have the beginning of just a political defeat that's temporary. What you see is the beginning of a structural defeat.
Yes.
And there's a long way to go. But if you cut off the flow of federal taxpayer dollars going to this nonprofit sector that feeds off of it, you're going to bleed them dry. You're going to have a lot of people who have a gender studies degree who've had some sort of government job for the last 4 years in the Biden administration where they got paid $150,000 a year to get on some Zoom calls, who all of a sudden are going to realize that the world has changed.
And we saw that even, trying to draw an Iowa tie when that first effort to pause some of the grants and things that were coming down. And immediately you saw the folks that are operating off of those funds lining up to get on the media to try and defend everything they're doing. It will not be easy to stop the flow of some of these dollars, but make no mistake, even if there is an end that part of the funds go to something that is a worthy cause, there's so much inefficiency in that system, and that efficiency by and large benefits the left. And, when we talk about structural defeats, it doesn't, at least from my standpoint, it is not about trying to change the rules of the game in a way that benefit conservatives. It's simply making it fair and taking away those things that have been given inappropriately to the left, and to just stop that the taxpayer funding
our
activist, really at the
right.
activist left.
Right.
And so it's fantastic. And I think that when Donald Trump was elected in 2016, the first time, it was extremely close. Could have gone either way. Hillary Clinton does one campaign stop in Wisconsin, spends a little money. He probably doesn't get elected or something like that, right? I mean, this was different. This was the American people clearly wanted Donald Trump and not a continuation of the Biden administration. It was a very plain decision. And you're seeing it now as President Trump has done these things and his approval rating has grown, which is somewhat normal for a new president. And approval ratings of the Democratic Party have flagged. He is doing what the American people asked him to do.
Absolutely. And they're going to respond to that positively. It's so amazing. What's the secret sauce? It's tell the American people what you're going to do, which is you're going to fix the things that are obvious problems, and then when you get into office, you do them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You don't have to have a degree from the Kennedy School of Government to figure that out. You just have to say, hey, this immigration system is completely broken, and when I get in there, we're going to fix it. And then he gets in there, and they start fixing it. Yeah. The American people are going to eat that up.
Yeah. I have a political science degree from a directional state university here in Iowa, of which there's only one, but that's fine. But, I understand that. So I didn't go to Kennedy School.
Right.
Yeah. They give people what they want. I am curious, and I don't know if you've thought about this much, but we've talked about federalism. We've talked about, over the past, what can we do in Iowa to sort of protect our own turf? Do you see anything coming out of the early news out of the administration that might expand opportunities to enhance state authority, block granting funds to the states? Is there any prospect, do you think, that's realistic? Cutting the strings, whatever you want to call it?
Well, I think one of the things that's been discussed is really taking a different look to what's the federal government's role in education. This has been something that has been on conservatives' minds for a long time. Why do we have a U.S. Department of Education? And certainly I can defend a small role of civil rights enforcement. I would like to have, whether it's at the Department of Education or a section in the Justice Department, I would like to have some... I was going to
say, couldn't that just be done at DOJ? But.
Yes, and I would like to see some civil rights investigations of the virulent anti-Semitism that was going on in federally funded universities over the last several years. I think that's an important federal role to protect civil rights. But the idea of sending tax dollars to Washington, D.C. to fund this permanent professional managerial class to come up with all their brilliant ideas and then to dole the money back out with strings attached to states doesn't make any sense at all. So I think that's a big one, and states who can show leadership on education reform are going to show the way that we don't need to spend billions and billions of dollars as a country to fund this money laundering operation, essentially, in a U.S. Department of Education when states are perfectly capable of providing for education in different ways for their own students. Yeah,
I saw on, I think it was on Facebook, the other day, and it was saw on there shared, and this person was actually educated, I think an attorney, advising people to download all their student loan forms from the Department of Education website because Trump's going to shut down the Department of Education and therefore wouldn't have access to all this information. Like, it's just I don't understand the fear that somehow if you shut down a federal agency, that function ceases to exist. Like somehow if you shut down or draw down the U.S. Department of Education, that now there will not be education anymore, or that these functions can't be sent somewhere else, or sent back to the states, or sent to another agency.
Nobody was ever educated before 1970, whatever, with the U.S. Department of Education. I don't know how we could spell the word education in order to come up with the Federal Department of Education in the 70s, right?
Yeah.
The sort of assumptions of dependency that get built up over time, combined with this mindset that you see from the left of we're going to judge the effectiveness of a program by the good intentions that we think were behind the program, rather than taking a hard look at, does this actually deliver services to people that's reasonably priced and of value for the taxpayers? Nobody here is against education.
Here's
right. We're in favor of education that's affordable and makes sense and comes free of this vast bureaucracy.
Well, and this is something that, we talked about education, John and I did in the last podcast, but we want it to be done well. We want it to be done efficiently. We want to get value for our investment in that. And here's the thing with funding the vast federal bureaucracy, whether it's in education or healthcare or whatever whatever thing it is that we're basically laundering money through the federal government. I don't know a number, but I sure think the vast majority of Iowans believe that we could stretch those dollars further here on our own. Give us the amount of money that might flow through the Federal Department of Education and simply let us spend it how we see fit here without that that administrative churn and burn. And it certainly exists in our Medicaid program. We could certainly do more with that here without the federal government and their strings and the burn of all that through there. When I talk about federalism, it's just allowing us to do more with those dollars.
Nothing is growing faster in the education sector than the number of people who are administrators. I think this chart has been on the ITR website. If not, you can easily put it on there.
We got a lot of cool charts.
You look at over, say, the last 50 years, in real terms, real dollars, comparing the number of students being educated, growing modestly as the population grows, and then the rate of inflation.
Yeah.
And then the dollars that are allocated towards teacher salaries, that curve is going up a little bit. It's more than the rate of inflation. The dollars going to administrators is shooting up.
Yeah.
Okay. That's paying for that permanent professional managerial class. You look around any school district and you can find person after person whose job title is essentially assistant superintendent for paperwork.
Yeah.
Now, at some level, it's not the fault of the local school board because you have this vast federal education bureaucracy pushing dollars down that come with strings attached.
Right.
Well, you need somebody there who can fill out all the paperwork right to show that you've done all the things you're supposed to do in order to get those federal dollars. But what if you just say stop? What if you just say stop and cut out all of that education bureaucracy and put the dollars back in the classroom?
Well, I don't want to be cynical, but some of that is similar to what the governor tried to do last year with her AEA reforms of saying, wait a minute, are we getting value out of this investment? Is there a better way to do it? There is absolutely a better way to do all of these things. But the problem you get into, and I agree with you completely, is it comes back to there's some sliver in there of a program or a need, and then that is elevated to justify the whole thing. And it becomes very hard from a reform perspective to get those things done. I think in Iowa, we've shown an ability to really work through them very well. But that's absolutely right. And it would be, I hope that it becomes one of the things that we see more of out of the Trump administration is that giving states more latitude to tailor the money towards the needs they have in these, cutting strings, letting us decide where those dollars, even if we're not looking at cost savings, which I would love to look for cost savings in that system, it's, the assistant superintendent for paperwork. What if we could just put those dollars in the classroom? I mean, that's what we're talking about, right?
Exactly.
So, and you stumbled across something, and this is I'm going to have to take a right-hand turn right now in the conversation, so bear with me.
I'm ready.
Okay. You just teased out something that we aren't ready to announce, but you want to talk about charts and directional spending on some of these. We got some things planned. Okay. They're early days, but you have spoiled one of our things that we're going to be working on down the road.
I love it.
So we're going to have some really exciting new stuff for you down the road.
I love it.
Okay.
Give the people what they want.
I think so. I think they like data. I think they like charts. They say they do. They also like podcasts where guys like me just sort of banter on about things they really don't know a whole lot about. They seem to enjoy it, but
dozens of people are going to enjoy this.
Dozens of people. So for those of you out there, of the dozens that started at the outset of this program and now 30 minutes in that are still with us, you got the tease of what's coming down the road.
I love it.
Good. Anything else that's just really on your mind today that you got to put a plug in for or talk about?
I just think it's an exciting time. I think the conservative movement is coalesced around leadership in Washington, D.C., leadership at the state capitol here in Des Moines. I think it's a good time, and we should appreciate it. I think, it's easy to get in the moment frustrated that, my issue didn't move forward today, or, the president didn't do this thing that I wish he would have done today, or, you can get frustrated about all those things, and you can find things to nitpick. But I'm going to go back to what I said. Think about how, if you were a principled conservative in Iowa in 2009, Barack Obama is president.
Yep.
Chet Culver's governor. Democrats run the state house.
Complete control of the Iowa Supreme Court.
Complete control of the Iowa Supreme Court. And how much things got better because a few people stood up. Terry Branstad came out of retirement to run. He didn't need to do that. You had some legislative majorities, first in the House, and then picked up the Senate 3 cycles later. Some key appointments to the Supreme Court. I can't imagine what the old Supreme Court would have done with a legal challenge to some of the education reforms.
Oh, yeah.
Right? The challenges that were not filed.
Yeah.
Because we have principled originalist justices on the court who would understand that those arguments have no merit. But any kind of education reform that could have been passed would have been struck down by the courts under that old regime. So take a moment to just enjoy it and show some appreciation that we are so blessed right now in this moment to be able to be thinking about how can we go to the next level.
Yeah. The thing that very well said, Alan, I think one of the things that people appreciate so much about seeing what President Trump is doing is action and getting the thing done. Strong, decisive action.
The visual of the night of the inauguration and then the next day, I mean, he knows how to get those visuals, right? He's very, very good at this. His team is very good at this. The visual of him with a box of pens signing these executive orders, okay, something that has redefined the presidency. People are going to be imitating that moment. Yep. 50 years from now, they're going to be imitating that moment of we're here, we're in charge, we're going to do things, signing orders. Give us more.
Yeah, that's right. And we've been doing it in Iowa, and we're going to keep doing it going forward and continuing to try and be the model for conservative reform across the country. So that's my plug for Iowa at the end of the show. So thanks for coming in.
It's a pleasure.
I can tell you had a lot of fun.
I did.
Good.
I did.
Well, good. We need to do this. It's been too long. Again, every time you're in here, I say I want this to be a regular feature. So hopefully I can hold you to that. You just come on over here to HQ and get in the library and I think we pulled it off. We didn't know where we were going, but I think we had a good episode.
All I ask is one of these days I want to do a podcast with John.
Yeah.
And what I'm going to do is before that podcast, I'm going to try and memorize, I'm going to do like a cocktail party trick. I'm going to memorize like 3 or 4 super obscure facts about Herbert Hoover.
Yes.
Or, the gold standard or, Austrian School of Economics. I mean, something.
Yes.
And I'm just going to just drop them on John.
Yes.
Right in the middle of the pod. So we got to rework the table so we can have 3 of us here.
Well, that's right. And that's coming. We're going to rework this so it's not just a 2-person show. We're going to get it. We're going to get back out. We got big plans, and I know John he'll turn bright red once you stump him, but he'll really appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right. Good. It's exciting for not only our dozens of listeners, but the handful that care about 1920s presidential politics.
Yeah.
It'll be an exciting time.
I love it.
All right, good. All right. Well, thanks, Alan. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe and tell your friends. And with all that, we will see you next time on ITR Live.